Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into an incredible stack of sources you provided on Madagascar, and I'm genuinely excited about the journey ahead.
Me too. It's quite a collection.
Imagine an island nation, okay, roughly 250 miles off the southeast coast of Africa,
Right.
where literally thousands of animal species are found nowhere else on Earth.
Mm.
Yes, including those, iconic lemurs.
Classic Madagascar image, isn't it?
Totally. And its unique flora. At least 20% of its plant species are endemic. It's just a land of unparalleled biodiversity.
It really is. And its history is just as rich and, well, complex.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Indeed. What our sources really illuminate isn't just what happened in Madagascar's history, but kind of why it unfolded the way it did.
Right.
We'll explore its profound isolation, the dynamic forces that shaped it,
Yep.
from its geographical marvels and early inhabitants right through to its colonial past, struggles for independence, and its contemporary challenges.
Exactly. And this deep dive is custom tailored for your curiosities. Our mission is to basically pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the surprising facts, to make you truly well-informed, but without feeling, totally overwhelmed.
Sounds like a plan.
So let's jump right in.
Yeah.
Madagascar. It stands as this extraordinary island nation in the Indian Ocean,
Mm-hmm.
proudly holding the title of the world's fourth largest island. That's after Greenland, New Guinea, and Borneo.
Yeah, it's huge. It stretches about 1,000 miles long. A truly vast landmass off Africa's southeastern coast.
That sheer scale, combined with its dramatic topography, that seems crucial, right?
Absolutely crucial to understanding Madagascar. Our sources highlight 3 distinct zones.
Yeah.
First, there's the vast central eastern highland, which really dominates the island.
Okay.
This region, largely composed of ancient igneous and volcanic rock, is home to impressive formations like Isolo and Ankaratra.
Ah, right.
It's the most populated area, characterized by family farms and those iconic rice terraces, all sustained by seasonal rainfall.
Got it. Rice terraces.
Then, moving east, you have a narrow eastern lowland coastal strip. Very lush, rain-drenched.
Okay, thin strip.
And finally, the wide western lowland. This is part of the Mozambique Channel Shelf. Major rivers drain out here, supporting vital deep-sea fishing and aquaculture, too.
Wow, so quite distinct regions. And I guess the climate is just as varied.
Just as varied as the land. The eastern coasts, influenced by monsoons, get the highest rainfall, particularly around the towering Saratana Massif.
Right.
But as you move west, especially to the southwest, it shifts to a much drier, semi-arid climate.
Interesting.
And what's fascinating is that temperature fluctuations on the island seem to have more to do with altitude than latitude.
Ah, so the highlands can really swing.
Exactly. Hot and humid days, but it can get considerably cooler at night up there.
So this incredible geographic and climatic diversity, plus the millennia of isolation, that's the recipe for its biodiversity.
That's the very foundation of its extraordinary biodiversity. Our sources reveal that the biodiversity on Madagascar, despite its relatively smaller size, is actually greater than that found across much larger swaths of mainland Africa.
Really?
Yeah. This unique blend of diverse habitats and long-term separation has fueled rapid evolution. It's led to an incredibly high degree of endemism.
Which is why you find so many species there and literally nowhere else on Earth.
Precisely.
Now here's where we uncover a real historical puzzle, isn't it? Despite all this unique preservation, why was Madagascar so profoundly isolated for so long?
It's a great question.
Early scientific ideas about drift ice seem to be, well, dismissed now.
Largely, yes.
What truly intrigues historians, based on these sources, is why the island wasn't recolonized by humans for such a vast period, even as its land masses were gradually shifting.
It's a compelling mystery. Our sources suggest something they call an ongoing strip of native copse, which seems to mean a continuous presence of, indigenous local groups or governance structures.
Native copse. Interesting term.
Yeah, and the idea is this played a significant role in preserving Madagascar's unique biogeography and ecosystem from a cultural fiend perspective, as one source puts it.
Okay.
One might look beyond conventional migration theories. You delve into the island's environment and resources for explanations, rather than focusing only on, say, quasi-prehistoric migrations.
So the land itself holds clues.
Potentially. And the Indian Ocean itself, traditionally this central point for travel, might have held a mysterious, almost sympathetic role, as one text describes it, in guiding or perhaps limiting early human movement.
Fascinating, a sort of selective barrier.
It's an idea that really challenges what we might typically assume about ancient seafaring, you know?
This long period of profound isolation, though, it wouldn't last forever.
No, things change.
Our sources indicate that around 500 BCE, the silence was finally broken. Initial arrivals of Austronesians.
That's the key moment, marking the end of millennia of isolation from continental landmasses.
And this ushered in new interactions, right? Roman-era commercial networks, indirectly global networks via West Africa, connections that persisted until about 1500 CE.
That's what the sources suggest. It's remarkable, too, how these early, simpler, more autonomous lifestyles of the Austronesian arrivals gradually transformed.
So.
They developed what's described as a generalized Austronesian ceremonialism, a unique set of cultural and spiritual practices that sort of set them apart from other Indian Ocean societies.
So they weren't just absorbed, they created something new.
Exactly. It truly underscores the sort of unprecedented nature of this global visitation by Austronesians. They weren't just passing through, they were fundamentally shaping a new society there.
And out of this new era of interaction, eventually the Merina Kingdom emerged, a really influential power starting in the 18th century.
Very influential, located on the Central Plateau. And yeah, when we talk about it, the terms Merina and Imerina often get used. Imerina means the place where the Merina people live, and Merina refers to those formerly all in the same tribe in the heart or original region.
Okay, got it. So this diverse region on the plateau was initially home to independent Malagasy-speaking tribes.
Right. And a key takeaway here is their early ingenuity. The Merina developed a sophisticated system of water control for agriculture. Pretty advanced for its time.
Like the rice terraces.
Connected to that, yes. They also established a social organization with clearly ranked classes, but one that could remarkably accommodate diverse tribal groups with varying linguistic and cultural backgrounds.
That seems crucial for unifying different groups.
It was. Our sources show that the first political unification of the Merina Kingdom actually began in the early 18th century. That really set the stage for their eventual dominance.
And this burgeoning Merina Empire didn't just stay put, did it? It expanded dramatically.
Oh, yeah. Moved into adjacent western, northern, and southern areas, they conquered ethnically and linguistically diverse tribes, eventually encompassing all of central and east Madagascar, and a sizable chunk of the northwest, too.
How did they govern such a diverse area?
Their principles were quite astute, actually. They primarily used indirect rule over conquered tribes through local subordinates.
Letting local leaders stay in place, sort of.
To an extent, yes. It highlights how the changing socio-political system and the need for wider communication and control pushed the Merina Kingdom to establish a more centralized national government.
So more structure.
Definitely. They began recruiting soldiers, police officers, civil servants from the provinces. They even established formal institutions like a Ministry of Interior for broader control. And they had unique practices too, like the covered execution ground and Taloha, which speaks to their established legal and political order.
Right, signs of a formal state. And this system helped spread a meritocratic bureaucracy and tax collection across the nation.
It did, really solidifying their power.
So as the Merina Kingdom was flourishing internally, Madagascar was also about to enter a new chapter. European encounters. Let's fast forward to the 1500s. Sailors from Portugal, France, Britain, the Netherlands.
Denmark, German states.
Yeah,
they start visiting and describing the island.
but those descriptions weren't always accurate, were they?
Not at all. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the early written texts and maps from this period are quite telling. They were often inaccurate, lacked sensitivity to the geography or local life.
Why was that?
Well, crucially, they were frequently based on information that was, as one source puts it, imperfectly understood, poorly recorded, or forcibly appropriated. And this, unfortunately, led to a simplified, confused, and often distorted vision of the island. It contributed to these fanciful myths and legends that just accumulated over centuries.
A powerful reminder of how those first impressions can really stick and shape things later.
Absolutely. How initial European perceptions could shape later colonial narratives.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fourth largest island in the world, yet it remained largely terra incognita, unknown land to Europeans until the end of the 16th century.
Yeah, often viewed by what civilized mankind of the era considered barbarous, just dismissed.
One striking aspect here, Portugal was the first European power to really push into the Indian Ocean, right? Yeah, into the 15th century.
That's right, significantly increasing their voyages, driven by the quest for gold, spices, other goods from the east.
And our sources point out something important about that.
They highlight a significant oversight in scholarship regarding these early Portuguese ventures, particularly in Annecy, the southeast tip of the island.
Annecy. Why was that important?
Well, Annecy was an early and crucial site of Afro-Eurasian interaction, pivotal to the emergence of global trade networks. It was first sighted by Diego Diaz way back in 1500.
So a key early contact point that maybe gets overlooked.
Seems that way, yes.
Okay, so as European influence grew over the centuries, we see increasing pressures and shifts in power, like the Convention of 1865 transferring powers from France to Britain.
And then French attempts at colonization became increasingly overt, like Admiral Pierre's march on Tenerife in 1883, just brazenly violated existing treaties.
Real provocation.
A pivotal moment. Queen Ranavalona III, the newly crowned queen, she vigorously tried to resist these French interests.
How did the French respond?
Well, our sources even mention how the French designed statues, symbolizing inequity as supposed gifts. A subtle but potent act of dominance, right?
Wow, like psychological warfare almost.
And the stupor, as one source calls it, from Admiral Pierre's 1883 march was still fresh. It highlights the profound shock and sense of violation the Malagasy people felt.
Yeah.
It raises an important question, really. How did these symbolic gestures, intended to assert dominance, often backfire by actually fueling resistance?
That's a good point. Speaking of powerful female leaders, we should mention Queen Ranavalona I, the Black Queen.
Ruled from 1828, a really significant figure.
She came to power amid growing fears of British economic dominance, is that right?
Yes, and she responded by forging alliances with the French and also expatriate construction workers from India.
Interesting alliances. But she wasn't friendly to everyone.
No, she viewed Christian missionaries, who were often closely linked to the British, with deep hostility. This led to a period marked by killings and imprisonments, affecting both Europeans and Malagasy converts. A tough time.
Definitely. And this leads into the Wars of Resistance.
Exactly. Which were incredibly complex, multifaceted conflicts. Notably, a significant revolt, often called Menelamba, broke out in Merina at the end of 1895. Right after the French seized Tananarive.
And how is that revolt interpreted?
Well, our sources present various interpretations. Some see it purely as anti-colonial resistance. Others view it as more of an internal civil conflict, maybe an attempt to restore the ex-queen, or even a reaction to broader administrative and economic problems.
So, lots of layers.
Lots of layers. What's certain, however, is that this resistance significantly hampered the French occupation and really thwarted their plans for a rapid conquest.
So even as the French were pushing, there were efforts to secure Madagascar for Britain too. Sir William Gordon Cumming, Mr. Chamberlain planning expeditions.
Yeah, there was definitely some geopolitical maneuvering happening, but it's fascinating to see how France ultimately imposed its rule despite these British interests.
And under French administration, things changed significantly.
They did. Madagascar developed this distinct dual geography and economic structure. You had a well-organized agricultural state society in the Central Highlands.
Right, the Merina heartland.
Contracting sharply with economically active coastal areas. These had lower population density, operated with dual monetary systems, and often relied on unregulated shadow economies.
A complex economic landscape then.
Very complex.
And surprisingly, traditional land tenure systems largely continued under French rule.
Quite surprisingly, yes. Even more, local social organizations found ways to fill the gaps where the French administration was deficient. This led to what our sources call a dual pattern of exploitation. Meaning that local forms of organization actually thrived in a kind of shadow economy, even as stripped property rights were being imposed on the legally recognized lands, a sort of parallel system.
Fascinating adaptation. Then World War II arrives. That brought new dangers.
Absolutely. After France's defeat in 1940, the island suddenly found itself governed by a pro-German Vichy regime.
Which put it in conflict with Britain.
Exactly. The British, trying to immobilize the French fleet, attacked Mormont, an action that Vichy propaganda immediately seized upon to paint the British as aggressors.
Right. And the war had other impacts.
It truly reshaped the island. There was a significant refugee crisis. French islanders fleeing the Japanese takeover in Indochina sought refuge in Madagascar.
Wow, refugees arriving.
Yeah, this mass displacement caused considerable alarm in the British Empire. It led to sanctions and eventually the 1942 British invasion and occupation. That put the island under military occupation for the duration of the war.
A stark example of how global conflicts reached even seemingly isolated places.
Definitely.
So, the wartime experiences clearly reshaped Madagascar's path. What was the immediate aftermath like after WWII? How did it set the stage for decolonization?
Well, the post-war years saw a dramatic turnaround. Civil rule was restored, and the island was set on a clear path towards decolonization.
Okay.
Interestingly, the colonial apprehension about what decolonization might mean proves somewhat ill-founded right at first. The Malagasy monarchy was symbolically resurrected, the king took control, reflecting a desire for internal sovereignty.
But the path wasn't smooth, was it? The intra-war period had been really tough.
A truly hard time for Madagascar. It was still reeling from that devastating 1928 famine. Vague promises from the colonial years just remained unfulfilled.
And France saw it as a burden.
Increasingly so, yes. A burden for France.
So how did the Malagasy people respond to this growing dissatisfaction?
Well, political groups started to emerge. One key group was the MTSMN, the Malagasy Association for the Moral and Social Renewal. They became increasingly politically conscious.
Trained in Paris, it says.
Some were, yes. They began to call for more representative government, even pushing for half the seats in the General Council.
And they used culture, too.
Very effectively. They developed a powerful separate cultural line, using community songs and folklore to appeal to the elite and subtly criticize missionaries. All aimed at raising Malagasy cultural awareness.
Smart. This ferment, did it contribute to that insurrectionary dynamic between 1895 and 1898?
It seems connected, yes. Civil disobedience, rural banditry spread across the island. The Menalamba movement, that northern and provincial insurrection, was often interpreted as anti-Merina and hostile to Christianity, which further accentuated the north-south divide.
So internal divisions as well as anti-colonial feeling.
Exactly. And what's crucial to understand here is that our sources highlight how these oppressive and exploitative changes and excesses on lands, dues, and violence provoked concerted offensive responses in the highlands.
So direct links between exploitation and resistance.
Undeniably. It underscores the deep-seated grievances and economic hardships that directly fueled these widespread movements.
All of this simmering discontent, it finally boiled over, right?
Yep.
March 29th, 1947. The uprising.
The pivotal moment. Sparked by attacks on the eastern part of the island against colonists. And it was explicitly aimed at achieving independence. That was the very first public use of that word in Madagascar.
Wow. And the uprising itself?
One of the most striking aspects, our sources reveal, was its spontaneous nature and the stark difference in strategy and weaponry between the local rebel leaders who adapted remarkably quickly and the highly sophisticated French forces. The French in particular were apparently astonished.
Astonished why?
Because they had, quote, neglected all the factors which produced the uprising. It shows a profound misunderstanding of the depth of local sentiment and organization.
A costly mistake for them.
Indeed.
And finally, after all this struggle, formal independence from France was achieved in 1960, ushering in a truly new historical epoch for Madagascar.
A new beginning.
But that hard-won freedom, the sources say it proved very fleeting.
Unfortunately, yes. The first decade after independence saw the emergence of what our sources call dictatorship and political princely imperialism. Not exactly the ideal start.
No. What challenges did the first president, Philibert Tirana, face?
A multitude of them. Our sources point to the sheer complexity of having 18 ethno-linguistic groups to unify, plus ambitious state projects that were simply disproportionate to their actual capacity.
Too much, too soon.
Seems like it. It led to an all-out political crisis. And this raises an important question, how do the aspirations for national unity and development often collide with these deeply rooted social and political realities in newly independent nations?
A common story, unfortunately. Then we see a period of multi-party elections in 1989, some democratic transitions.
Right.
But they didn't last.
Regrettably, no, they devolved towards authoritarianism within 2 years. By the mid-1990s, backsliding.
Why? What caused this de-democratization?
The reasons are critical to understand. Our sources highlight several factors. Increased executive power, the persistence of old elitist institutions, pervasive corruption, and significant restraints on civil liberties all played a part.
A familiar pattern in some places.
It really emphasizes the necessity of having a sizable, pro-democratic reform coalition outside of the regime for genuine democratic transition to truly take root and actually be sustained. You need pressure from below.
Makes sense. Okay, turning to the economy. Madagascar's current situation is described as rather unstable.
That's putting it mildly. Predictions of modest 4% growth, maybe, but it's still very much struggling from past devastation.
And our deep dive often reveals how interconnected these issues are: economy, environment.
Absolutely. And in Madagascar's case, its abundant biodiversity and natural resources, which should be this incredible national treasure, are instead heavily exploited and poorly managed.
What are the specific economic challenges?
Oh, they're numerous. Disrupted agricultural production, impeded investments, slow development in mineral resources, a lack of good policies, an unfortunate shortage of skilled human resources, lack of funds, weak regulatory frameworks. The list goes on.
And the human cost.
The country faces unacceptable levels of poverty and malnutrition. It ranks as one of the poorest in the world, 114th in the UN Human Development Index last time I checked. It's stark.
And the environmental side of that coin.
Equally concerning, deforestation continues at an alarming rate. Over 70% of the natural forest is gone. That's twice the global average.
Why? What's driving it?
Mainly slash-and-burn agriculture, TAVI they call it, plus timber harvesting and charcoal production for fuel.
And the consequences.
Severe soil erosion, silting of rivers, and noticeable climatic changes. We're seeing droughts in the north, heavier rains and flooding in the south. It's a compounding crisis, ecological disaster feeding economic hardship.
Yet amidst these profound challenges, Madagascar somehow maintains this incredibly rich cultural heritage that speaks volumes about its resilience.
It really does.
Take the Merina Kingdom's kabari, for instance, this verbal art form.
Yes, kabari. It can be lengthy orations or pithy sayings, used for everything from like incantations to politicking. It actually flourished, ironically, with the introduction of the Latin alphabet by missionaries.
But the French didn't like it.
No, with French colonial rule, it became despised by the ruling French. Its traditional themes became taboo, suppressed.
And other traditional practices are threatened too, like healing.
What's truly disheartening here is how traditional practices, including indigenous healing, are now directly threatened by this biodiversity loss we were just talking about.
How so?
Medicinal plants become increasingly scarce as their habitats are destroyed. And the invaluable cultural knowledge about their use diminishes as fewer people are trained in their application. Plus, the influx of Western medicine also plays a role in this decline.
So it's not just an ecological crisis, it's cultural too.
Exactly, an ecological, evolutionary, economic, and deeply cultural crisis, all intertwined.
Turning now to Madagascar's place in the world. Its international relations seem quite complex.
They are. There's a clear legacy of ties to France, obviously. But our sources highlight a notable shift in its primary foreign allegiance towards the United States post-independence.
So moving away from the former colonizer.
To some extent. The relationship with the U.S. certainly picked up steam with the pro-Western regime in power. But interestingly, aid was notably withheld when that same regime lost popular support.
So conditional support.
Illustrates the conditional nature of such alliances, yes. Meanwhile, Madagascar found itself on a distinct collision course with France.
Oh.
Exemplified by controversies like the phosphates contract dispute and the 1974 disaster campaign, which was a concerted effort to reclaim French assets and mineral rights for the Malagasy state, pushing back.
Right. But then, by the mid-1990s, we see a shift towards regional cooperation, joining SADC.
Yes, the Southern African Development Community, or SADC, in 1997. This was a strategic move to collectively address pressing challenges: democratic governance, poverty alleviation, environmental degradation, security threats, things they couldn't tackle alone.
What drove that commitment?
Well, it stemmed from deep historical, cultural, and economic links with its African neighbors, plus a growing dependence on regional imports. SADC was seen as a crucial ally.
Makes sense. Strength in numbers.
Pretty much. It reinforces the nation's adoption of a more transparent foreign policy and the government's efforts to raise awareness for these vital regional efforts.
And internally, on a more local scale, the government post-2002 adopted a significant decentralization approach.
That's right, aiming to make governance more transparent and participatory. This was built on 3 fundamental laws: governing local collectives, the transfer of powers, and something called RED, community-based planning and execution of public investments. And these laws reflect key principles of good governance, often emphasized by multilateral agencies like the World Bank, aiming for greater democracy, efficiency, equity, and sustainability in local governance.
So an ongoing effort to reshape local government involves stakeholders more.
Exactly, reflecting the country's commitment both to these global partnerships and to internal reform. It's a continuous
So
process.
pulling it all together.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, Madagascar's story is a truly compelling case study, isn't it? A nation striving for self-determination against this incredibly complex backdrop of colonial legacies, intricate internal complexities, and persistent global pressures.
Absolutely.
And it powerfully challenges that historical assertion you sometimes hear that it somehow failed to enter the modern world by 1895. Our sources clearly show a constant dynamic evolution and, frankly, incredible resilience.
That's a truly profound way to frame it. So, okay, for one final thought, considering everything we've learned from these sources about Madagascar's remarkable journey, what truly stands out to you?
Hmm, good question.
Is it the sheer, almost miraculous biodiversity and its growing fragility? Is it the enduring resilience of its diverse peoples facing immense challenges? Or maybe that ongoing dance between internal aspirations and external perceptions that continue to shape its destiny?
It's hard to pick one, isn't it? Maybe
No.
it's the tension between all of those.
Yeah. We've explored how this land, once dismissed as terra incognita by European explorers, yet brimming with its own deep history and vibrant life, continues to navigate its unique path in the modern world.
Hmm.
What does Madagascar's story teach us, maybe, about the true meaning of development and progress when you view it through the lens of a land so incredibly rich in endemism, so unique, and so resilient in spirit?
That's the question to ponder, isn't it?
Perhaps it's a call for us, and for you listening, to reflect on that ongoing interplay between a nation's unique identity, its historical narrative, and its complex place in the modern global landscape. Something to think about.